name's Jason Owen Fox. I'm a little bit older than the other seminarians, and that is because I'm considered what's called a second vocation. I would say that I had my first calling to the priesthood around 8. And I was very, very involved with serving and youth group, and we had these series of retreats called Christ Renews His Parish. And so there's a youth one, a men's one, and a women's one. So I went to the youth one, and that was my first experience of Eucharistic adoration. And it changed my life. And I absolutely loved it. I was like, what is happening? Loved it. And I feel like I was called to the priesthood in, 8, 9. My grandmother was very influential. So Christ Renews His Parish, I did the children's retreat. Then I became part of the children's core team for the next one. And then when I became an adult, I did the men's retreat, and then I became part of that core team. Of course, I didn't, become part of the core team or go to the women's retreat, but it was that specific retreat was extremely influential, and it has carried me through. When I went into college, I drifted away from the church. It's absolutely true. And I had moved many times, and I found myself on tall ships, sailing on tall ships. So I went from a deckhand to a 100-ton coastal captain's license. But I will never forget, first of all, going through a storm at sea, my first day on the job, 200 miles off the coast, huge storm. We almost went over. And by the grace of God, I don't know how we didn't. And it was very scary. And it showed me, there is mortality. And in that same experience of being on the boats, I also sailed through a rainbow. And I remember standing on the bow of the ship and just being totally amazed at creation. So then when I came home, my gift for getting my captain's license from my parents was LASIK eye surgery. But there was a stipulation that I had to go to their eye doctor, so that was there is a point to this. So I went and had the LASIK eye surgery, and he's like, I want you to be here for 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, and 1.5 years. And I'm like, well, I'll stay for the 6 months. I haven't been home in a couple of years. It'll be nice to get in touch with people. Well, in that 6 months, we found out that my father had a brain tumor. It was about the size of a baseball. So he had to have open brain surgery, which he survived, but it was very painful, long recovery. And I couldn't leave once that had happened. So I was living in a town called Grosse Ile, Michigan, which is about 45 minutes north of Toledo, about halfway between Detroit and Toledo. And it's an island. And I worked on a toll bridge. I used to swing the bridge for ships coming through, and there was a lot of contact with the police. And in that contact with the police, I got to know them really well, and they were like, you would make a very good police officer. And I was like, well, I'm thinking about going back on the boats, but you know what, you're right, I really would. So I started an education in law enforcement. And the whole time I was being just tugged and pulled into thinking, this just isn't what you're supposed to be doing. And so I graduated from college and then in criminal justice, and I was starting the police academy. Me being me, I needed to pass, because I was in my 30s at that point, I needed to pass at the 18-year-old level. So they have like age brackets, 18 to 21. This is your standards called the MCLs, Michigan Code of Law Enforcement Standard. So that's your physical. So I'm training, and I was on the treadmill, and it was a week before my MCOL, and I felt a pop in my knee. And I'm like, oh man. And by the time that treadmill stopped, I couldn't support my weight. So I could not move. I was down. So I called them and I'm like, I hurt my knee, can we reschedule? And they're like, no, you cannot. They're very strict about it. So that Friday, the test is on a Saturday, I went to get an MRI, and he's like, there's nothing wrong with your knee. He's like, nothing is showing up on this MRI. I was like, I can't even stand up. What are you talking about? He's like, nothing is wrong. I can see nothing wrong with it. So called them, canceled. And they're like, you'll have to reschedule next year. And I'm like, ugh. And Monday, my knee was completely healed. Not an ounce of pain, nothing. And I was like, what was that? So I waited a year, went back, passed all of the tests and everything again. And a week before the police academy started, I got appendicitis, Super Bowl Sunday. So my sister is like, Jason, God's telling you that you're not to be a police officer. And I'm like, something, Kelly, I think you're right. I pulled into the parking lot of my brand new apartment, which my sister had picked out. I had never even seen it before. And that's when I got my second calling. Find a Catholic church. And I'm like, oh, okay. In the parking lot, just pulling in. So unloaded. The next day, I was walking around trying to figure out my new neighborhood. And I walked right to St. Joan of Arc Catholic Church in Powell. Literally, I was like, I wonder what's behind those bushes. And I go and walk around those bushes, and I'm like, Catholic Church. And I'm like, well, that just happened. And so I started doing adoration either at 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 in the morning once a week. And that is when I had, remember I told you were going to be a priest? The time is now, clear as day.